If you are a writer or want to be one, how do you go about getting your hard work published? It turns out it's getting harder and harder to find an agent or a publisher. So many authors are turning to self-publishing. Unfortunately, very few are successful. So what's a writer to do? Today I have a guest who will share his advice and tips just for you on this edition of The Inside Story.
Welcome to another episode of The Inside Story, exclusively on Liftable.tv. They say everyone has a book in them, but turning that desire into a compelling story can seem overwhelming. That's where The Inside Story comes in. Your host, Walt Larimore, is himself an author of over 40 books. Walt's goal in every episode is to inspire and entertain you by spending quality time with best-selling authors and having conversations about the art and the heart of writing. In this episode, you'll be encouraged and equipped to lean into your own writing dream and pick up some insider tips and tricks of the trade. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready for The Inside Story on Liftable.tv.
Hi everyone, I'm Walt Larimore, and I'm happy you're joining me in my home office. You just typed "the end" on the first draft of your first book. Time to celebrate, right? Break out the champagne and start dreaming about royalties and film deals and the critical acclaims that you know are coming your way. And then once you've gotten that out of your system, it's time to get to work. You have quite a journey ahead to go from draft to publication, and there are many routes that you can take to get there. Where do you start? Well, are you ready for some shocking data? The average book in the U.S. sells fewer than 200 copies annually and sells fewer than 1,000 copies over its lifetime. A self-published, digital-only book does even worse, selling an average of about 250 copies in its lifetime. In fact, if you write a book and it gets published, it has less than a 1% chance of making it to an actual bookstore. But it's even worse. Editors and publishers agree that the odds of even being published are only 1 to 2%. And that is, they only accept and publish 1 or 2 out of every 100 manuscripts they receive. But the good news is that you can do many things to increase your odds. If you write an original and engaging story with lively and full-drawn characters, with proper grammar and all the words spelled correctly, the odds of being published, as long as you show persistence, are actually pretty good. And we have the privilege of visiting with a man who is the founder of the Bindery Agency, which he started in 2017 after 20 years of working in book publishing and journalism. He started his career at the Los Angeles Times, and then he moved into book publishing, serving as vice president and publisher for several imprints of Penguin Random House, the largest publisher of trade books in the English-speaking world. He's been part of publishing numerous bestsellers and award-winning books with beloved authors, celebrities, leaders, and media luminaries. The Inside Story is delighted to welcome Alex Field. Alex, glad you're here.
Thank you, Walt. My pleasure.
Before we get into the questions that everyone has about an agent and agency and publishing, I wanted to go back to something that I've wanted to ask several of our guests, and that is, you started in journalism.
Yeah.
And it seems a lot of authors do.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why would someone want to go to journalism first instead of perhaps creative writing school or something?
It's a good question. Journalism is, and it certainly has changed a lot from when I first got into it to where it is today. When I first got into it, it was like the early 90s when I started writing for newspapers and freelance writing and all of that. We were still pasting up the paper, the old school way. None of it was digital. That transition happened a few years later. But I think it's good training, whether you go into publishing as an editor or whether you want to be a writer, because you're working with deadlines, you're working with content, and the craft of writing is front and center every single day. Now, it doesn't always translate to fiction or to a certain kind of nonfiction book publishing, because journalistic writing is very specific and it can be kind of impersonal, but it's really great training for just getting up and writing every single day and learning how to turn in something by deadline,
Well, I'll tell you how old I am. When I was a kid, I had a part-time job typesetting.
Yes.
I mean, and now when I actually type, I appreciate that I can do that way instead of putting that type together. So have an agent, not have an agent. What are the pros? What are the cons? And when in my writing career should I think about an agent?
Yeah. I get this question all the time from the authors that we work with and authors that we talk to at our agency. I could say this. When I was a publisher, when there was an agent involved, we had a very different interaction with the authors that we worked with than when there wasn't. And oftentimes that meant that we would put a lot more money on the table for the deal. Because we knew the agent was involved, we had to be on our best behavior. Not that publishers are out to do anything malicious with the authors they're serving. Certainly it's a partnership every single time. But, there are publisher-friendly contracts and there are author-friendly contracts. There are publisher-friendly book deals and author-friendly book deals. And so all I know is now I get to advocate for authors every day. And I've seen it on the other side for so many years. Authors be mistreated, not always intentionally, but now I get to take all that experience and that learning and serve authors every single day, make sure they get the very best deal possible, that their publisher treats them at the top of the list with every author on their list, and they're not trying to take advantage of them in any particular way. So that's one area that I talk about. The finances are important for authors as well, and not just because of the money. Typically, and we don't have to go into the weeds here, but there's an advance paid and then royalties paid once that advance earns back. Agents fight for the authors to get the very best deal possible, because I know sitting on the other side when I was a publisher and we were setting up our marketing budget for the spring list of releases, say, we had a limited amount of money to market those books. And it was really important. It's important now to me, for the authors I serve, that I get them the most time and attention and money in that marketing budget for the authors that we're representing. So agents fight for that by getting you a really good deal and then advocating throughout the process, whether it's marketing, cover, title, design, whatever it really becomes important to the author. In that partnership. So agents are advocates for the whole process.
Well, and I've found, at least this seems to be my observation, that really good agents look for win-win deals. It's not just all about their client, but they understand the publisher, and they help craft deals that work well for both, which really is in the benefit of the author.
That's exactly right. Yeah. There are some agents out there who maybe in a prior life were lawyers first, and they really can, and I won't name any names, of course, but as a publisher, I remember doing deals with some agents that we never wanted to work with again. Being candid, a lot of our agents worked in publishing before, so they understand the publishers in this. I mean, oftentimes for ministry as well, like their heart is in this. They're passionate about these books that they want to publish. They're not out there to try and do anything malicious to the authors, of course. So it really is a partnership. The best deals are win-win deals. Some would also say, I've heard one of my good friends, Jerry Jenkins, say this, in fact, that sometimes the best deals are the ones where each side feels a little bit of pain. And it's not perfect for either side, but it is a win-win at the same time, too.
Let's talk about your extensive experience as an acquisitions editor and a publisher. Yeah. What do authors need to know about the pressures? Now, take off your agent hat, put on your publisher hat. What do you like young authors to understand about the pressures you're under?
Yeah. I think that's a really important role for authors to understand, especially first-time authors. Every acquisitions editor is a little bit under the microscope when they're bringing a new book to the table. So just to paint the picture, they get excited about a proposal that maybe an author or an agent sent them, and then they have to walk into a room with other editors, their publisher, marketing and sales people, finance people. Well, that gets really interesting. And they have to essentially make a pitch to that team why this book is so important, why they think it's going to work and serve a lot of people well, but also, why they need to risk $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, sometimes a lot more money than that, to take the risk on that book, to print it, to publish it, to design it. So when I was a publisher, I would look at our team of acquisitions editors. Sometimes we'd have 3 to 5 people doing that work, out there looking for good content. And each one would develop sort of a voice in a sense. These are the types of books they're really good at. These are the types of authors they're bringing to our table. But also, you kind of look at each one of them as a little business within the larger publishing business. How are their books doing? How are their books performing? And as a result of that sort of, evaluation, they're under a lot of pressure. Every time they bring a book to the table, they have to sort of prove that this book is going to work. And it's impossible to prove that. I mean, it's really a difficult industry, as you know.
They call it pub board when everybody meets.
That's it.
And when an acquisitions editor comes into pub board, how much time do they have to actually make the presentation?
Sometimes it doesn't go very long before somebody in the room shoots it down. It really depends on the makeup of the team. Sometimes I've been in meetings like that, both as an acquisitions editor and as a publisher, where we're debating one book for hours. Okay. And it can be because we care about these books. That's the great thing. People in publishing, generally, they care about the books they're publishing. And so there's a lot of back and forth to try to make sure they're making the wisest decisions. But at the end of the day, I'll say this one stat: 8 out of 10 books don't perform up to expectations. So 2 out of the 10 books that we acquired when I was on the publishing side kind of paid for the rest of the list in essence. So that's hard.
What can an author do to increase those odds a little bit? I'll just tell a real quick story myself. I remember working on a proposal for a book earlier in my career, and the agent I was working with said, "You only have a couple pages, Walt." And I said, but they can't really get to the story in a couple pages. He said, they don't want to. So what can I do? Is it true you only have a page or 2 to grab? And what can I do to increase those odds?
Yeah, that's, it's true. I mean, most editors get into a rhythm where there are stacks of manuscripts, if it's fiction. Usually they like to see a complete manuscript for fiction, or stacks of proposals for nonfiction. And they get into a rhythm where they're reading very quickly. So they have to come to that determination of, does this project and does this author have what I need, not only to make the pitch to sell the team at the publisher, but also to make the book work in the marketplace, to sell it to people, to real live consumers. And so sometimes I've found that it only takes a few pages. Or they're looking for specific things. So they're going to flip through the proposal and say, okay, what does an author's platform look like? And platform, we hear that term thrown around a lot these days. It's the way I define it is how, does an author have a built-in audience? Are they building an audience of potential readers for whatever it is they're writing? And that can happen in 1,000 different ways. Blogging, podcasting, TV show. I mean, there's a variety of things, social media. And so that's maybe one piece for nonfiction in particular that's, top of the list for a lot of the teams that are out there acquiring books.
As an agent, as you're looking at potential clients, that's even important for you then, whether an author has a platform. So in general, would you recommend to new writers or hopeful writers that as they're gaining their writing skills, they also find a way to gain an audience before they write that first book? Is that what you're saying?
I do recommend that. I don't recommend that authors put themselves on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the other things. You don't have to be everywhere, but I do recommend make yourself public somewhere. Put your content out there, even if it's in little snippets on Twitter or on another blogging platform or on everybody's podcasting now, which makes it also difficult to get attention. But put your content out there. Try to build that readership, that potential audience with what you eventually want to write in long form.
When an author is sending a proposal to you or a proposal to a publisher, they have a cover letter that they put. What are some of the biggest mistakes that authors make when it comes to those cover letters?
Honestly, one of the ones that is so simple, but it drives me crazy a little bit sometimes, is just having a really long cover letter. Sometimes the concept is wonderful. The author sounds delightful, But then the cover letter just goes on and on and on, and I'm flipping through looking for the pertinent information. So that's a simple one. Keep it concise, keep it focused on the concept of your book, a little bit about you, how you're reaching out to readers or potential readers already. And then, edit it, do a quick spell check, give it a couple of looks, at least read through it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I'm imagining as either a publisher or an agent that if a proposal came and it had grammatical mistakes and spelling, that would be a pretty big turnoff, I'm thinking.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal. Honestly, because we do get so many submissions, at least to our agency, sometimes, any excuse to stop reading the cover letter, it sounds terrible, but there's so many of them coming in. It makes it easy to move on to the next one. And don't get me wrong, I got into this craft and this business because I'm passionate about words and how they can change people's lives. That's why I got into this business. I love the fact that I get to work with authors and book publishers every single day. And I believe at the end of the day, a lot of really good work happens through this business, but it's hard and everybody has a book they want to write. So we're always looking to refine and get to that one.
I've heard young writers and aspiring writers, wannabe writers say, well, why in the world would I want to give up 15% of my advance and my royalties to an agent? I can just do that myself. And I've heard others say, and I think I probably go with this group, that if a writer doesn't make that plus more, if an agent doesn't make that plus more, you don't have a good agent.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot of ways I like to answer this question because I do get it all the time. Self-publishing is easier now than ever. If your goal is to write something down and share it with your family and friends and keep it for posterity, and that's a worthy, honorable goal. I have books that I've inherited from family members, generations past, and I treasure those. But if that's your goal, Amazon has very simple options for everyone these days. But if your goal is to reach as many readers as possible and to write for a long time, maybe as a career or as part of a whole suite of things that you're pursuing, then an agent can actually make that incredibly successful. Now, there are different types of agents. There are agents who specialize in marketing or agents who are lawyers, and they're really good at the contract part. Our agency, we've all worked in publishing, and I've served in a variety of roles in that. And so I bring that to bear every time when it comes to negotiation, when it comes to shaping a book concept or editing sample chapters for a proposal. An agent's not just a deal maker, although that's a huge part of what they do. But an agent's really a partner, a partner in the long-term process of a writer's career. For a young writer, doesn't know any agents, how do you find one? What resources are there for you? Yeah, the number one way we find new authors to work with is through referral. So if you have a friend who has an agent or a friend who's writing books, maybe talk to that person. You can also go to places like the Association of Author Representatives. It's an association for literary agents, AAR.org. They recently changed their name, so they're shifting their website, but it's, I think now, Association of Literary Agents. Either way, they have a whole sort of canon of ethics. Every one of their literary agents signs, and that makes them, reputable, and they work with integrity. They're not going to charge their authors inordinately. So check that out. It's often said that the first step to finding an agent begins with actually finishing your book, especially if you're an unpublished author. True or false? Sometimes, yes. I think when you finish your book, that could mean a lot of different things. When you type the end for the first time, that's a wonderful feeling. But I would recommend take your time, read through the book again, give it another edit. If you haven't thought about platform or how you want to reach readers yourself, maybe take some steps there before you reach out. But yeah, I mean, whenever you end up with an agent, they'll help you through the steps that come after. So in general,
having a finished manuscript would be more positive than negative as opposed to just having an idea.
Absolutely. As far as a finished manuscript is concerned, we're selling books every single day based on a couple of sample chapters, primarily for nonfiction books. For fiction, if you're writing a novel, you have to finish it all the way through.
How clean does the manuscript have to be?
I have heard people say that, as long as the concept is clear and you've written a great draft, go for it. I would say take your time to get as much of it, get it as far as you can, get every word right. Even if you have a group of readers that you can have reading it with you and giving you feedback, do that before you submit it to either an agent or a publisher.
Now, almost all agents now are online.
Yeah.
I get the sense that almost all agents have submission guidelines.
Yeah.
It strikes me that a young writer needs to find out, you don't send the same submission the same way to every potential agent, right? You want to submit following their guidelines. Otherwise, you're out before you get started?
That's exactly right. Yeah, most agents have a website and guidelines right there on the website. We would like to see a sample chapter, a table of contents, your author bio. So those guidelines are usually on an agent's site. In fact, the number one way we kind of weed things out that come into us is we have a series of categories that we work in, and it's on our website. And a lot of the stuff that comes in doesn't fit like those categories, and we don't work with authors in those categories at this time. So it's a simple way to say no. So check and make sure you're sending it to the right people who are working in that category, and it'll serve you far better.
There you go. So, okay, Alex, an author, completes their book, gives it a thorough edit, completes a list of agents, finds out their submission guidelines. Now it's time to write a query letter. What is that, and what makes a good one?
Honestly, a query letter is really the email we get from an author where they're introducing themselves to us for the first time and saying, this is the kind of book we want to write. This is why I'm so passionate about this story or this idea or this message. And I would take as much care with the query letter as you do with the sample writings or the manuscript. That is your first impression with a potential partner. And I would think of it this way also. Every literary agent, like the acquisitions editors we talked about earlier, is taking a risk on every author they sign and believing in them that they're going to do well together long term. So take some care with that letter. And you can use it for multiple agents. That's fine. But introduce yourself. Why are you writing this? What's the passion behind this story or this idea?
I've always thought of a query letter as actually being a small sample of my writing. Would that be off base? Or?
No, I think that's right on. That's right on. We look at query letters as an example of how this writer can write. Yeah.
So I'm looking at possible agents and possible agencies. What should I look for as a writer as I'm looking for an agent?
Like I said earlier, every literary agent has certain specialties. And so if you as a writer feel very confident with the editorial part of the work that goes into book publishing, the writing itself, the editing, then maybe you look for an agent with a different sensibility. If you need help legally, if you need help with the marketing part, all that aside though, a literary agent needs to have integrity and needs to be able to show essentially that they can help you earn, and it's a weird thing to say, but earn more working with you than you would on your own. An agent shouldn't just be along for the ride. They should be showing you how they're going to make this really work. And you know this, like earning a living as a writer is very difficult. And agents are in there really, really fighting for the authors they serve, not just to earn a living, but to get these books they're writing to as many people as possible. That's the goal.
Our time's running out, Alex, but I wonder, I've got my query letter, I've got my manuscript, I've got my agents, I've got my platform. I find someone who's interested in me. What should I expect from my agent as an author?
This is different for every agent, but for us, we take a lot of time and care at the beginning of the process to make sure that the author is writing the right book first. That we try to understand what are the goals that you have as an author over the next few years, over your entire career as a writer. Where do you want to go, and how do we take steps to help you get there? We shape the concept of the books that we're going to share with publishers. We edit the proposals that we put together with our authors. And then we negotiate very hard. We never accept a first offer. And we make sure that every contract we do is author friendly in a lot of different ways, not just publisher friendly. And I've seen thousands of contracts from small publishers and big publishers, and there are lots of ways they come together, but your agent should be with you every step of the way, from that beginning idea to the negotiation, to the marketing launch of your book, to the title and the cover design, all of it.
I've always sensed that agents, you get this book about whatever, the publishers.
Yeah.
You kind of know where it's more likely to sell, but even more than that, which editor or which acquisitions editor, not to play the system, but who's going to understand what you're sending.
Yep. Exactly right. Within each team, there's 4 to 6 editors. Mm-hmm. Each one of them has different passions or different things they really do well. We have people in mind. When we sign an author, already we're thinking, oh, this is perfect
so
for
you get
Jenny or Bob, right?
So you get the book to them. They send you a contract. You negotiate that out. Now we're into the process. The manuscript's submitted. Yeah. What can I expect from you once we're into that editing process?
Yeah, the agents aren't as involved in editing, and I like to step back there because the author-editor relationship is so important. And every editor at a publishing company has their own vision for how they want that book to come forward. We're there if we're needed. Oftentimes where I get the next call is, hey, they're trying to change my title. They like this title more, or we're going to go with this other cover design, and that's where we start to
title,
engage.
Cover, PR stuff. There may be a little author, publisher spat about this or that.
Yeah.
I sense that the agent can, for me as an author, the agent can say, well, that's unreasonable. I mean, that's wrong for you to expect that. Let's don't ask for that. Or, no, that's right, and I can advocate for that. Is that a proper role for?
Absolutely.
The agent?
Yeah, I think it's, especially for first-time authors or newer authors, we can set those expectations. And if they're really passionate about one of those things, we get in there and advocate. And not that we're fighting with publishers. In fact, we really try hard to be as kind as we can be while being very firm and advocating for the things our authors feel are to die for. Like this is a deal breaker. We can't change that.
My last question. I remember the first book that I was able to write, and I remember the day. I remember how sick I got of it after edit after edit after edit. But then I remember that day it arrived. I think it's indescribable for an author. I've never asked an agent that, but I wonder, you've gone through the process. You have a new author. They've never been published. You mold, you shape, you work, you pray, you sell them, you go through the whole process. What's it like as an agent when you get the book?
It's a little bit similar. Obviously, it's not the same at all because we didn't write every word. But especially for new authors, it's a joy. It's an absolute rewarding feeling. I have an author right now who's got a book coming out. I think it's next week or the week after. And we're emailing and texting all the time as we get ready to launch this book into the world with a marketing campaign. And we got our books last week, and I opened it up, and it doesn't happen every time, but it's just a feeling of joy. Like we're putting something into the world. I tell writers all the time, this is an honorable, a noble thing you're doing, to take a story or an idea or something you've learned in life and to offer it to the world and to put it out there in such a vulnerable way. Come on, there's no greater privilege.
Well, I want to end with this. I hope you'll forgive me, because after our viewers see you, I suspect you're going to get a lot more of those query letters. So I want to apologize.
It's okay.
Alex Fields, thank you for being part of the Inside Story.
Thank you, Walt.
So before we end today's program, if you have a comment or suggestion or an author you'd like me to interview, just email me at insidestory@liftable.tv. And if you'd like to subscribe to one of my blogs or any of my newsletters, just sign up at www.drwalt.com. That's drwalt.com. And until our next visit, remember the words of the psalmist who wrote, God rewrote the text of my life when I opened the book of my heart to His eyes, and may His and your writing be blessed.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Inside Story, hosted by Walt Larimore. If you have comments about the show, or there's an author you'd love to hear from, email Walt at insidestory@liftable.tv.